Hi, my name is David, and I try to play guitar. I'm not very good, as you can tell. One day, I saw a video of blues great Joe Bonamassa getting very technical about his guitar amplifiers. For a guitar player, that guy really knows his stuff about amps. He inspired me to learn more. But to really understand guitar amps, you need to take them apart and put them back together. I watched hundreds of videos. I read all kinds of books. From Craigslist and eBay, I bought a used soldering iron, some old voltmeters, an ancient oscilloscope, and other test gear. Eventually, I built an entire electronics lab. Now, I guess I'm sort of an amp mechanic. I fix other electronics too, and this is my journey. I figured I'd share so others can learn too. I hope you like it, and just as a disclaimer, be sure to consult an expert before working with electricity. Hi, Dave the Amp Mechanic, coming to you from my amp lab in Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm surrounded by a bunch of amplifiers that need to be repaired. Some of them are mine, some of them came from friends, and we'll get to them. I'm trying to get one piece of gear that I have here in the lab that I use for diagnostics fixed first, because it will help me move a little bit more quickly through all of these repairs. And that's my Heathkit T4 signal tracer. And I took it apart and I suddenly realized that I need some parts for it. I have to put those parts on order. It's going to take about a week before they get here. So I was wondering, well, what kind of video could I shoot in the meantime? And I figured I'd do another video about shooting videos. And this time the video is about the SmallRig system that I use with my camera, because it's a cage that goes around the camera, and then you can accessorize the cage with attachments that hold things like your microphones and your external monitors, and maybe a microphone mixer. You can put all sorts of things on the cage to accessorize your camera, because the camera doesn't have a way of attaching all of those things very easily. The problem is the SmallRig system, as popular as it is, their website really doesn't tell you how to configure it. You have all these different modules that you can connect, but it doesn't give you any guidance on, like, well, if you need a microphone, get this, and if you need, this other attachment, you need these other two little things, and a little fitting here and a little fitting there, and put it all together and it works. It just lacked all of that information that I was trying to get to in order to figure out what to buy. So I just studied pictures like for hours and hours and hours, and finally kind of deciphered what exactly I needed, and then I bought those items and I got them into the lab here, put the camera cage together, put the camera in it, and it's all working quite nicely. But I thought I would make a video to show you how to configure the SmallRig system and all of its modular components in the event that you're having the same difficulty, because SmallRig's website just offers like no guidance on this at all, and you think they would. So obviously you'd think they want to make it really easy for people to figure out how to use their system and all the modules, so they could buy that stuff and reuse it. So I figured I'd make a video on how to put it all together, so that way if you're looking to use the SmallRig system and all of its modules, you can watch my video, and hopefully that'll give you a really good head start on setting one up for yourself. So let's go over to the studio to my left here. I'll take the camera that's pointed at me, my Sony NEX7, take it off the tripod, bring it over there, and we'll point the GoPro at it and record a little video on how I configured my system. Okay, so here we have my Sony NEX7 mirrorless DSLR camera, and it's mounted inside a SmallRig cage with a bunch of accessories mounted to the cage itself. And it took me quite a while to figure out how to get this optimized for my setup, and I suspect that other people have these challenges as well. Now, this is usually the camera I'm using to shoot me in the amp lab, and this microphone as well, so there's a chance that my voice sounds different because I'm on a different mic, and we're now shooting this particular video with a GoPro mounted on a tripod right behind me here. So what we're looking at is the SmallRig cage with a bunch of SmallRig accessories connected to it, and then other things connected to that, like the microphone. And in this case, this is a Beach Tech DXA SLR Pro microphone mixer. I won't go too much into what this mixer does today, other than I will point out that a lot of these cameras have something called auto gain control on them, and it's very difficult to plug a good XLR microphone into them. And by XLR microphone, I mean something that has an XLR jack on it, kind of like this one. I have a bunch of really high-end microphones that I like to use, and there's really no way to easily plug it into the camera without a microphone mixer. The problem is that when you do that, auto gain control will introduce some hiss into the audio, and this particular microphone mixer has a way of suppressing the auto gain control. Won't go too far into it for this video, maybe that'll be the subject of another video, but I needed this mixer to be pretty close to the camera, because what it allows me to do is it allows me to take any microphone. For example, this is a Sony cardioid, which means highly directional. Wherever you point it at, that's where it's going to pick the audio up from. The Sony cardioid microphone, and I get to plug it in. It's got an XLR jack. These are XLR jacks. I plug it into the side of the mixer here. Hopefully we can see that, and then from there it feeds through this cable into the side of the camera. I'm just using this to kind of prop it up so it doesn't tilt over here and just fall on its side. It goes into the side of the camera here through this cable. And that's why these cages are very specifically designed for different cameras, because in the case of like this, the Sony NEX7, you need to have access to some of these little doors and things on the side. So they had to make it in a way that made it very easy to maintain that access to some of the doors and buttons on the camera, while at the same time providing the protection that the cage provides, and then giving you the opportunity to also mount different devices onto it. Now, if you look around, the SmallRig has a lot of these holes in the sides and around the top and stuff like that, and these holes are either 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch holes, and depending what you might screw into them, this helps you get the accessories mounted right onto the camera. So some of these, like we'll get into it, but like this little piece of hardware right here is screwed in with the 1/4 inch screws. However, I think, like, here's an example of, I think that's a 3/8 inch threading there, and you know, that goes in there. This is like very sort of standard size threading across a lot of video hardware, things like lights and whatnot. So that's very helpful to have all of these screw holes in the side of the cage. One thing that was very important to me was I needed to be able to mount this very quickly onto a tripod, and so on the bottom side of this you can see that we have this here. This is a tripod plate. It goes into my Manfrotto tripods, and I did another video, I'll put a link to it, about these tripod plates, because you can buy them. You can buy like 3 or 4 of them in a way that you mount them to the bottom of each of your cameras, and it's really easy to move your cameras around to your different tripods. This came in very handy, and as you can see, there's a screw on the bottom here, and it's with that screw that I fasten the tripod plate to the bottom of the cage. Normally, most cameras have a screw hole on their bottom as well for a tripod mount in the same way. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to sort of take this thing apart for you, even though I wish I didn't have to do that, but I will, just to show you how it all goes together, and then I will identify each of the parts, including their part numbers, as well as their cost and what their purpose is in terms of my rig here. So the first thing, this bar that the microphone mixer is mounted onto is actually not a part of the SmallRig system. This is actually it's a dual camera mount, so you can mount this to a tripod, and then you can mount like a couple cameras on top of it or other accessories. I just so happen to have that laying around, and so this is one of the most important things, was that I was able to keep the microphone mixer close to the camera. And let me just unplug the microphone here. So there goes the XLR jack. That's That's a good example of what a male XLR jack looks like. So we'll move that over here. And this little, this just comes off like that. So I'll just take this off, boom. And there you go, there's like one of those 3/4 screws. And you can see how I mounted the microphone mixer to this, because it's also got a mounting screw on the bottom. And each of these thumb screw things came with this to mount 2 cameras to it, and I just took it out and flipped one screw around, went through the other direction. Now I'll unplug this here, so now we'll just move this off to the side. And so what we have here is what they call the NATO, what SmallRig calls the NATO cheese handle. And what's great about this is this is what you can use to hold your camera and move it around. You can grip the camera with this thing. If you go online and you look on the SmallRig website or on Amazon, you'll see that there are quite a few different kinds of handles. What I liked about this particular handle was that it had the hole right in this piece right here, so that this little carbon fiber tube, which SmallRig also sells, this is what's called a 15mm tube, it's describing the diameter, can go through that hole, and then you can mount other things, for example, this shock mount for the boom mic onto this. So this is a good way to get your boom mic located close to the camera, pointing in the same direction. So this is what they call the NATO cheese handle grip, and surprisingly, this is the most expensive part of the whole setup. The cage, by the way, was just $29, but the grip was, if I'm not mistaken, it was $89. This is the NATO cheese handle grip number 649 if you're interested in it. Now, there are other grips on Amazon, and what I'll show you here is that one of the key differences with this grip is that it connects to this other rail with this so that it can come right off very easily. And so here's the rail. It's mounted on a rail, and I can just push that button down and it comes off. We'll get to that in a minute. But the other grips, one of the other grips that's on there is the 1638. You fasten it directly to the cage, and I can imagine, like, if you have a microphone and a microphone mixer and maybe even an external video monitor all set up here, and you wanted to switch cameras, you might want to move all of that gear over to another camera that also has a SmallRig cage on it. You would have to unscrew it from the one cage and then screw it back into the other one. I like this version better because it's a little more of a quick release setup, right? So first, let's just kind of come back to this 15mm tube here. This is this tube. I was not able to buy this by itself on Amazon. This tube, it comes in a package of 2. It's a 6-inch tube, and it's the 15mm, that's the diameter, 6-inch or 150 millimeters long carbon fiber rod number 1872. Now, I want to turn this around here, because what you're going to see is that if I turn it around, and I'm trying to keep it in the camera here, but if I loosen this thing right here, whoops, then I can take the whole tube out like that, right? So let's move the camera over for a second, and let's just take a look at this. There's the tube, and then here you have the boom microphone mount, and what's really neat about this mount, first of all, it's a boom mic mount, so it's got these rubber high tension threads in there, if you want to call it that, that hold the microphone. If you have a boom mic like this, gives it shock absorption. That way, any chance of anything bumping the camera, it doesn't go right through the system, the SmallRig system, and then cause noise in the microphone. This is basically not only a suspension system, but also a shock absorbing system. Okay, and I'll kind of turn it around here so you can see the other side. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll put a big furry windsock on these boom mics. Now, I don't know how heavy of a microphone this thing can take. It's holding this one pretty good. Here's what's really neat about it. First of all, it attaches to the rod, right? So this little tightener attaches to the rod. But then, and this one, by the way, you can adjust the angle of the microphone. But what this one does, which is really kind of cool, is, let's see if we can loosen it up here real quick, is you can swivel like that. And I thought that was perfect for what I wanted. That way I could basically point it whatever direction I wanted to. And of course this one here, if I loosen that, I'll be able to slide the thing right off the rod. So the shock mount, the microphone shock mount, was the Universal Microphone Suspension Shock Mount number 1802, and this cost me $29 on eBay. Okay, now you can get these rods in different lengths if you want something longer. I didn't think I needed anything longer, but you can imagine, like, you might, if you're going to put an external HDMI video monitor on to this whole rig, you might need a longer one to mount that onto. So I'm going to move that out of the way right now and bring back the camera here, and so I think we can see it in view. And here, you know, I just, going back to the handle, right? You can see it's got a lot of these holes in it, and this here, if you loosen these up with an Allen key, what it allows you to do is it allows you to adjust where this handle is. You could slide it back and forward on this particular mount. Quite frankly, the mount, I don't know if you can look under here. I don't know, hopefully the camera can see it, it's not too dark, but the mount actually comes out. It goes into a slot underneath the handle, and if you loosen these screws, it'll come right out. The other thing you can do is you can also mount, if you have the right microphone that, you know, that fits in here, or you can take one of these rods that I had and put it in this hole here and tighten it down. So a lot of flexibility. Now, when you hear about these different systems, you see the phrase cold shoe and hot shoe a lot of times. And what we're talking about there when we hear about shoes are the things that some accessories, some camera accessories like flashes, microphones sometimes have what's called a cold shoe mount. And this is a cold shoe, and what makes it cold is, like, there's nothing in the camera that activates anything in the shoe. That would be different from a hot shoe, where, like, let's say if you mounted a flash in here or a light of some sort, and when you took your picture with the camera, it activated the light through the shoe. That's called a hot shoe. So anyway, now what was really the other thing I liked about this particular system is that, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is that it's a quick release system. So as opposed to having to connect it directly to the cage, it comes off like that. So now let's take and move this over a little bit and just look at this assembly by itself. And if you, I don't know if you can see here, but there's like, it's a grooved slot. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to slide it on to this piece right here, which by itself is a separate piece in the SmallRig setup. And these are the sorts of things that took me a while to figure out, because again, on the SmallRig website, they don't say, well, you need this and this and this. It just doesn't tell you all of those things. Now, that particular part, it's called the SmallRig Quick Release 4cm Safety Rail number 1409. This little piece right here that I have attached to the cage with these two fastener screws. And there are other things that will connect to this, other SmallRig accessories, so that's one thing to be on the lookout for. And this was $9.99, right? Just that one piece alone. I'm not going to remove this from the cage, but just so you can see, for example, I think like, you know, the way the cage is designed, for example, if you want to get the flash to come out, let's see if I can do that. There the flash comes out, right? And this is, by the way, a hot shoe right here, but we're not going to use that. And the cages have to be designed in a way that allow this to happen, give you access to the buttons, allow that to come out. Now, if I pop the flash out like that, you see that it kind of gets obstructed by this thing. So these are some things to think about. I don't use the flash, so I'm not really too concerned about it. You have different locations of these screw holes on the top, and so what that allows you to do is position this little rail in different places. Now, this is a 4-centimeter rail, means 4 centimeters long, but you could have you could get one that is longer. They come in different lengths. For example, they come in 7-centimeter lengths, 10-centimeter lengths, and 15-centimeter lengths. Again, that's the 4-centimeter safety rail number 1409. And then finally, the cage itself. Now, I'm not going to take it apart all the way, but this cage is the cage that's specific to the Sony NEX7 as well as the Sony A6000 and I think the A6300 camera. And the base cage in this case is the model number 1661. It will be different for you if you're using a separate camera. If you go to the SmallRig website, they do have pretty good guidance on which cage you need for which cameras. And in my case, I was very lucky. This cost $29.99 compared to this fancy schmancy handle, which was, you know, $89. It was hard to believe that the handle was more than the cage itself, but that was the case. So, you know, once I had the cage, then I started connecting the other accessories. Chances are I'll probably mount an external monitor to the setup at some point. One of the more important things was how with this cage, as you can see, here's the battery compartment. You can open it up like that and stick your battery in. No battery in there right now because what I use is a hardwired power pack that you plug into the wall, and then there's like a piece that looks like the battery that goes in here to power the camera up, so you don't have to worry about battery life. And again, that's another you know, important thing. You want that door to be able to open when you have the cage on there. Now, one last thing I just want to point out for those of you who are looking to configure one of these systems for your camera is that the one screw that I sometimes have a little bit of a challenge with, the camera will start to move around inside the cage a little bit, and that is underneath this, where the tripod plate is connected. Underneath there is a screw that goes into the bottom of the camera and fastens the camera to the cage, and that seems to want to loosen up every now and then. It seems like when you know, you have a big temperature fluctuation, it gets hot and then it gets cold again, it will suddenly loosen up, and that's not unusual when things are expanding and contracting. And so what I would suggest is you get some thread locking glue that you can buy in any hardware store. The one thing to look out for when you're buying some of that thread locking glue is that there are different levels of it, and they tell you what temperatures the glue what temperature the glue is good to. And what that means is that, let's say you want to loosen something, that means you have to heat the glue up to that temperature in order to loosen it. So be very careful which one you buy. Don't get this super extra strength one, because then there's a good chance that you'll need a heat gun, if you don't already own one, just to get the thing hot enough in order to loosen it if you ever have to loosen it and take the camera out of the cage. So I've got some thread locking glue, and I'm going to actually, now that I have this apart, I'll be applying it on the bottom there. In fact, I don't know if I can loosen, I can't loosen this right now. I don't have my little screwdriver with me, but I will loosen that, and once I have it loose, I'll get in there and loosen the other screw up, put some thread locker on it, and then put the camera back in the cage in a way that it doesn't come loose. So that's it. Again, the two sites to go to in order to acquire all of these things, to accessorize your SmallRig setup are, Amazon's pretty good, and so is eBay for certain things. Like, for example, I could not get the carbon fiber tube here, the rod, individually. I couldn't find it on Amazon, but I did find it on eBay. One thing to be on the lookout for, though, when you're buying on eBay, and I'm not sure how to protect yourself against it, just be careful. If you're nervous, then I would hold off and wait till you're not nervous, is that I think because of the popularity of the SmallRig system, a lot of companies are out there making counterfeit parts for it. And what you don't want to end up doing is paying extra money for something that claims to be SmallRig when it's not, and then when you get it, it may not fit really perfectly or something like that. So that's it. That's how I've got SmallRig set up. I will undoubtedly be adding more to the system. I'm hoping to replace this camera with the Sony a6300, which addresses three big challenges that this particular camera has. One is the autofocus is kind of slow. The other one is that this camera overheats when I'm shooting video. And the third one is that the a6300 does what's called clean HDMI out. So if I'm using the camera to capture video for a web conference, there are no other artifacts on the display that's going out into the web conference, for example, an autofocus area or something like that. They call that clean HDMI. The good news is that if I get an a6300, it's the exact same form factor as the NEX7, and I'll be able to just take the NEX7 out of this cage and put the a6300 in it. Or I might choose to buy another cage that's just like this one for the a6300. That way I can move around my microphone mixer and any other accessories that I have connected to the base SmallRig cage. Okay, well there you have it. I hope that for those of you out there that are looking to maybe configure the SmallRig system with your cameras, that this was really helpful. I know I wish that I had encountered a video like this one when I first got started. I wish the SmallRig website was a little bit better at how they gave advice out to customers so that their customers could have an easier time doing it. If you have questions, put them in the comments below and I'll try to answer those questions. If you want to see videos of some of the other things I talked about, for example, the microphone mixer, put that up there. I can also do a little video on that. Maybe about microphones. I have a lot of microphones here, and over the years I've learned quite a bit about audio. Could try to be helpful with that. And then finally, if you like the video, then click like, or indicate that you enjoyed it in some other way. Maybe share it around. I don't make any money on these videos. I just basically am sharing the knowledge that I've gained in hopes that other people will benefit from my knowledge. So that's it from my amp lab in Boston, Massachusetts. Hopefully the next video I get to will be one where we continue the repairs here on the Heathkit T4 signal tracer. Thanks very much, and I'll see you at the next video.